Anyway, hey everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to the Little Lunch Lectures. Friday, December 4th, first Friday. Yay! My name is Stephanie Borrett. I'm the Director of Donor Relations for the Coastal Land Trust, and I'm glad to have everybody here today. For the few of you who I think might be new to Little Lunch Lectures, we are recording the lecture today, so you can either have your camera on or off, but just want to let you know that we are recording and we are on Facebook Live. There will be a few links in the chat throughout the talk for some other things for you to check out. Just click the link, it'll open up the page, and then you can go look at it later after the talk is over. Finally, we're going to keep everybody on mute, but at the end when we have time for a Q&A, you can just unmute yourself and you can ask a question if you would like to. At that time, no problem. Or type it into the chat if you'd prefer, and I'll read it out loud for Scott to answer. I would like to welcome Scott Pohlman today to the Little Lunch Lecture stage. Scott is on the staff of the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program, which is an organization, a state organization that ensures public access to information about the ecological significance of natural areas in North Carolina. As a founding member of the Cape Fear Arch Conservation Collaboration, Scott helped form a partnership of organizations and individuals who protect this special region in the Cape Fear area, a place where many plants and animals thrive that are found nowhere else on Earth. So it's pretty cool. Today, Scott is going to talk with us about the Cape Fear Arch Conservation Collaboration. Thank you very much for being here today, Scott, and it's all you.
All right, thanks. I'm going to try and share my screen, see if this works. And is it working?
I see your, yes, now it's on presentation mode. Thanks.
All right, let me minimize this. Okay. Well, thanks. And I am going to start the presentation, and Jesica Blake is actually going to come in at the end. So I'll talk a little bit about the history of the Cape Fear Arch, and then Jesica will provide an update. About this part of the world, and as Stephanie noted, there are things that are found here that aren't found really anywhere else in the world. And so the Venus flytrap is probably the most widely recognized feature of this landscape, but there are others like them. I checked this morning, and there's still only one population in the world. Plymouth gentian, down in the lower left, is interesting. It has a distribution where there's it occurs along the Guacamole River, and the next nearest location is Cape Cod, and then another population up in the Canadian provinces. So really interesting part of the world, things that occur here really nowhere else or very few other places in the world. We also have these really diverse and beautiful landscapes. The marshes of Bald Head Island, the longleaf pine forest savannas of the Green Swamp, and then the cypress swamps of the Black River. So a lot of the folks who live and work in this part of the world with all these great natural features became interested in maybe establishing a partnership to see if there's a way to work together and leverage resources and sort of amplify what they were already doing in the landscape. I really had a hand in getting this going. And there was this meeting back in 2005. Partners got together that were working in the lower Cape Fear to look at environmental issues. And then there was a 2-day meeting in 2006, and one of the tasks was to look at other regional partnerships to see what was working and what might be applicable in this landscape. So you can see on this agenda, there's the Blue Ridge Forever, which was a regional partnership in the mountains, and then Onslow Bight, which was sort of adjacent to the Cape Fear area. And then in April of 2006, now I'm borrowing slides directly from Dan Bell, who was also in the beginning. There was a meeting at Camp Pretty Pond to sort of see if we could make this collaboration happen and what it would take and looked at a lot of different features. You know, what's the geography we're working on? How can we set up a conservation plan or conservation design? And you can see some of the topics that were on the agenda at the time, like the internationally big topic for conversation. But a mission, proposed mission statement at least, came out of this 2006 meeting. And it was kind of borrowed from other partnerships, but that worked out pretty well because some of the folks that were involved in this Cape Fear Arch area were also working in some of these other regional partnerships, agencies or organizations that already approved some of this language. So it was sort of an easy lift, if you will. And it's also broad, sort of non-restrictive language and allows the freedom for any member to act independently in accordance with their own organization's mission. There is a blank in this. We didn't have the name just yet back in 2006, but a little bit later in 2006, the Cape Fear Arch, and I saw Richard LeBlanc is on this, and I really have to credit Richard for this, I think. This is geologic feature that corresponds to a high rate of endemism and biodiversity. And you can see this map. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but you know where you are. And that's one of the hotspots for biodiversity in the United States. In 2007, actually, and I think this is something that Camilla was instrumental in as well, there was a paid staff person that helped organize meetings and move the group forward. So in 2007, we were actually able to finalize this memorandum of understanding. It was updated in 2010. What's really interesting about the partners in the Cape Fear Arch, they include some of the partners that work in some of the other landscapes, like the Onslow Bight or the Sandhills Conservation Partnership. But those partnerships are really, there's a heavy military presence. So there isn't really a heavy military presence. There is a military installation in the Cape Fear Arch, but there isn't a Camp Lejeune or a Fort Bragg. But what's really interesting is that there is a lot more diverse representation in this partnership, including local governments and industry, private industry and private landowners in this. So it's really an interesting group to work with. And the mission statement, develop and implement a community conservation vision to build awareness, protection, and stewardship of the region's important natural resources. And those natural resources include water quality, working lands, and then of course lots of habitat. The focus area is a two-state area, which does present some challenges. For some of us, our sort of, I shouldn't say interest, but, our certainly authority ends of the border. So, we do work really hard to maintain this sort of connection across the state lines. And I did, when I made the slide, I had to borrow logos. So not all the logos are there, and I apologize for any partners who aren't represented on that map. So this region has an incredible diversity of habitats. So I mentioned, I had the pictures of the longleaf pine and the green swamp preserve, but it also has these Pocosin and peatland communities. And this is a pre-settlement vegetation map or historic vegetation, what most likely would have been in this landscape. So the green is the longleaf pine. And then the red are the peat soils, which would be Pocosins or pond pine woodlands, or in some cases, Atlantic white cedar. And some of the other habitats, there are maritime influenced habitats. And there are aquatic habitats that are really important in this landscape, both marine and freshwater. Bottomland hardwoods. So in this map, the sort of yellow-orange, those are bottomland hardwoods and cypress gum swamp areas. They're pretty prominent in this landscape, and then marshes. So the goals of the partnership included identifying high priority habitats and mapping those habitats, and promoting conservation, restoration, health, and sustainable use of the landscape and native communities that depend on the lands and waters of the Cape Fear Arch region. And then encouraging the public-private partnerships to leverage resources and achieve land conservation results on a landscape scale. You can tell in the background, I still have a landline at my house. All right, so the way that partnership works, there is an executive committee. I should point out there is no longer paid staff. This is an all volunteer effort. People trying to do this on top of their day job, if you will. There's an executive committee. It has 5 people on it. And they sort of help direct or guide the partnership and development implementation of the Arches community conservation vision. And there are standalone committees that work on, to take a piece of this, work on conservation, education, outreach, infrastructure. And then, of course, individual members work under their organization or agency mission on the common ground issues. And so the two, you could say 2 of the really big benefits of the partnership are sharing information and facilitating collaboration among partners. And usually, meetings are where we do this information sharing, and typically there have been quarterly meetings, and the meeting topics have been really interesting in a lot of these cases. Longleaf and fire restoration, Cape Fear River, local initiatives and paddle trails, flytrap cultivation, biofuels, transportation, Cape Fear River lock and dam projects, local research and monitoring updates, Mountains to Sea Trail, climate change. Some of these, I think there's a talk on the Mountains to Sea Trail coming up in a couple of weeks, actually, on this forum. But anyway, so at these quarterly meetings, there's a chance to exchange information and also just a chance to see other partners, have a conversation on the side, see what people are doing, have a partner update. And then individual partners work to implement the conservation goals, including collaboration on grants, for land protection or for ecosystem management, such as prescribed fire. And then, advocacy efforts for the organizations that can do that kind of work. I included a few examples of success, the workshops that have been held. There's also the Fire in the Pines Festival, and then the conservation plan itself, which rolled out in 2009 and was revised in 2014. And I am going to just talk a little bit about the conservation plan and provide some examples. And this is where I'm going to, refer back to some of these things that occur in the Cape Fear Arch that nowhere else in the world, and refer back to them. But the plan was sort of informed initially by the conservation values of the Cape Fear Arch, like I mentioned, water quality, significant natural communities, and the importance of working lands. And then we defined conservation targets, so priority species and priority ecosystems. Looked at threats to the conservation targets, defined conservation strategies, and then mapped focal areas to focus these strategies. And so I'm going to go through these sort of middle parts of this. I'm going to go through and provide examples and see if that maybe helps. If it just helps explain it a little bit better. So example of a conservation target. In this case, it's a species, the Savannah indigo bush. Grows only in longleaf pines, or grows in longleaf pine savannas on loamy soils. And there are only 40 populations known globally. I just checked this for North Carolina last night to make sure I was being accurate. And there are 35 extant populations, which represents most of the world's known populations of this plant. And it really only occurs in Brunswick and Columbus counties right now in North Carolina, and then 2 populations in South Carolina. So if you are going to protect this, species in the world in its natural habitat, the Cape Fear Arch is where you have to do it. And then an example of a sort of a focal priority area would be the Black River, which has the oldest known trees in eastern North America, the greatest concentration of old growth bald cypress trees currently known, and one of the best examples of Blackwater bottomland hardwoods natural community in the nation. So this is a focal area, a priority area, and I could have chosen any of the others like the 421 Sand Ridge or Boiling Spring Lakes, but I just showed this one because it is a really amazing place. So on my map, the focal areas are represented in the orange blobs, the orange outlines, and you can see that a lot of cases, they connect to focal areas. And in the map, also the green represents what we call managed areas. They're conservation lands, or in some cases, some military installations. But there are 21 of these focal areas, and they represent a number of different types of things. So there are riverine, riparian focal areas like the Guacamole River itself, as well as terrestrial areas, and then coastal zone focal areas as well.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
If I could interrupt us for a second to ask, this is a question came in through the chat about why is the Northeast Cape Fear River not included in the arch? And you know, again, looking at this little yellow border line, and it is very clearly not a part of it. So just curious about that.
Well, it was a turf battle. There was already an Onslow Bight Conservation Partnership.
Sorry, didn't mean to.
Yeah, it's not really. It wasn't really a turf battle. It was very amicable. So there was already an Onslow Bight Conservation Partnership or Conservation Forum working, and that they definitely clearly included that Northeast Cape Fear River area. So we sort of, you know, we drew this, and there still is overlap. So the Onslow Bight boundary actually extends a little bit onto the Cape Fear Arch boundary. But a lot of the partners are the same with Coastal Land Trust and the Nature Conservancy and other partners. So it didn't seem like it was really a competition. You know, we're still working on those projects within those areas. But, you know, we tried to, you know, base these focal areas or these, you know, these regional partnerships on some basis, you know, whether it was extent of longleaf pine or, you know, watersheds or something like that.
Okay, fair enough. Good answer. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. Sorry, I'm not looking at the chat, so anyone can chime in anytime with any questions.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
Don't worry about the chat. We'll take care of it.
Okay. All right, so I'll move ahead and sort of dive into one of these focal areas. In this case, the Bladen Lake Complex. So again, features if you want to conserve some of the best in the world, this is the landscape you want to work in. So these Carolina bays occur here. These are some of the largest and best developed Carolina bays in the world. And it's full of you know, longleaf pine and peatland pocosin habitats. And the conservation targets that are within this focal area included this list of plant and animal species. And I used a star to denote the species that were also in the State Wildlife Action Plan, just to show the overlap, you know, how there's a lot of different things that are trying to, you know, all happen. And these are sort of similar, you know, areas of interest. So, so those are State Wildlife Action Plan species. And here are the conservation strategies, you know, thinking about what's the threat in this landscape. You know, how do you address the threat? And one of the threats would be fire suppression. So increasing areas of longleaf pine forest ecosystem and increased prescribed fire in those longleaf pine areas, as well as in the pocosin habitats where you can. And then the other big conservation strategy is really focusing on the, you know, maintaining ecological connectivity across this landscape. You know, it's a landscape with a lot of different owners. There are some very large owners, both public and private. But how can we work with them to see the bigger picture and to, you know, incorporate sort of a wildlife conservation? How would an animal move across this landscape, you know, to through stepping stones or more or less intact corridors? So that was a recommendation for this landscape. And now I'm really going to focus, sort of wrapping up here, on this last bullet in the goal. Encouraging public-private partnerships to leverage resources and achieve land conservation on a landscape scale. And to do that, I'm going to start talking about some of the really, you know, incredible habitats in this landscape, especially in this Lake Guacamole River corridor. This is one of our riverine and riparian focus areas. Sorry, the dog is here now. So Lake Guacamole, the Guacamole River, and associated floodplains are the key features in this priority area. So in Lake Guacamole itself, you have this incredible concentration of endemic animals, such as the fish, the Guacamole silverside, you know, known here and nowhere else in the world. freshwater mollusks such as the Guacamole fat mucket and Guacamole spike. And then the upper Guacamole River swamp consists of the most extensive cypress gum swamp in the state and has habitat for the endemic Cape Fear three-tooth, which is another, that's a mollusk, but it's a terrestrial mollusk. And I just checked this morning just to make sure this is still accurate. It is. This is the only place in the world it's known still. And then the Guacamole River, downstream of Lake Guacamole, provides high-quality aquatic habitat for several species, including the near-endemic Carolina pygmy sunfish and Guacamole crayfish, and other freshwater mussels. So I'm going to show a series of maps, and I'm going to try to make a point with different colors. And again, people can stop me if I'm not making this, if I'm not clear in how I express this, but this map has the natural heritage areas with the color-coded significance for ecological significance. So exceptional, these are the best of the best. These are the, if in the world of trying to prioritize high quality habitats for conservation, the Natural Heritage Program identifies these areas, and these are ecological boundaries. So they're based on the extent of vegetation, or in some cases watersheds. But these are the priority habitats for conservation. So you can see all the pink in this, and I have some identified. So greens. If you can see my cursor over here in Juniper Creek, Lake Guacamole itself. So now I'm switching over, and the color here, the green, represents managed areas again. So these are lands that are owned for conservation, or there are conservation easements encumbering these properties, so they will remain in conservation. So sort of at the beginning of the Cape Fear Arch conservation collaboration, these are the areas that were in conservation. So the state park, Lake Guacamole State Park, this is part of the game land. These are some of the early game land acquisitions down here on Juniper Creek and the Guacamole River down here. And then, of course, the Nature Conservancy's Green Swamp Preserve over here. But there wasn't a lot of conservation yet. But since 2007, in purple, these are all the things that have been. And remember back that I showed the high priority habitats, and there's a lot of overlap between these high priority habitats and the lands that were conserved. So a lot of this now is Juniper Creek game land here. There are Brunswick County open space properties here. There's the Conservation Fund has a large project here. There's additional game land acquisitions, and then there's a coastal land trust easement. I think there's some other groups that have easements as well in this landscape. So there is a lot going on. Oh, and there's some coastal land trust preserves on the Campbell property. So a lot has happened, and in fact, I tallied it up, 38,000 acres of high priority habitats since the beginning of the Cape Fear Arch in this landscape. So this is really conservation at a landscape scale. Represents a high level of success for the Cape Fear Arch partnership.
I just want to take a second to say, like, awesome! That is so cool. I love that map so much, and I might ask you if we can use that. It's just really
absolutely.
To see all those places clicking in.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's really exciting. And it actually has a sort of personal connection for me. I just was going to take a minute to recognize Camilla being, it's hard to believe, but Camilla is going to retire, I understand, in just a few weeks. So after the University of Georgia, said I could claim to be a conservation biologist, and I was moving back to North Carolina, and one of the very first projects I got to work on was a Guacamole riparian corridor conservation plan for the Guacamole River. It was a great project, and it's actually better than my phone pictures of the hard copy show here. But I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the work that the Coastal Land Trust and Camilla have done, yeah, I appreciate.
I'm gonna speak over you on this one particular moment. I want you to know that Guacamole River Riparian Corridor conservation design was the foundation for strategy and how we continue to work in the Guacamole River. So yes, Camilla and Janice are amazing at land conservation. but your early work sort of put them in the right direction, and it is still part of something that we use today.
Wow. Thanks. So I was going to say thanks to the Coastal Land Trust and Camilla for all the work they do and focusing on the Guacamole River, and wish Camilla all the best. And I'm going to now hand it over to you, Jessica. Thank you.
Oh, I wasn't quite ready for like the full transition, but I'm here for it. Well, I really appreciate that history of the Cape Fear Arch and all of the background work that went into creating this collaboration, from Kristen Rose's early work, who was on staff here at the Coastal Land Trust for that particular task, to where it is today. So there are a couple of things I just want to say from its inception and its updates on the management plan. Currently, the executive committee that Scott mentioned has the 5 seats filled, and that is John Taggart with UNCW, Lindsay Addison of NC Audubon, Chesley Ward of the Wildlife Resources Commission, Beth Darrow of Bald Head Island Conservancy, and myself. And we are also so lucky to have the support of Michelle Lee of the Nature Conservancy, who really keeps all of us focused and sends out the emails in a timely and organized manner, because like Scott said, the executive committee is voluntary. So it is just people from some of the partners that are part of the MOU of the Cape Fear Arch that commit to spend time to continue to move this collaboration forward. And like Scott also said, that we have a goal of having quarterly meetings, and at those meetings we invite people, partners, agencies, governments, nonprofits, businesses, and industries to do presentations that have something to do with conservation values in the area, whether it's protection, whether it's timber management, whether it's something controversial. It's an informative space where all of these partners can get together and network. And like Scott also mentioned, our neighboring partnership, the Onslow Bight Conservation Forum, does do a lot of the same things with the same people on a large landscape scale. So let's say longleaf restoration and conservation is something the Arch focuses on. So does the Onslow Bight. So that landscape conversation is given a place when we have one joint meeting a year. So both the Onslow Bight and Cape Fear Arch get together, which expands the networking, and we report on things that sort of apply to both spaces. Well, as you know, in COVID, we haven't had any quarterly meetings this year, but we still have been trudging forward in our own spaces with our own partners that were created out of the foundation of this strong collaboration. And the successes of the conservation and acquisition and restoration work just continue to move on. So once we are meeting again in person, there'll be tons of things to update everyone on, but some of those accomplishments are, like Scott was referring to, we have been able to use this platform to connect and apply for funding in groups and partnerships. So NIFWIF funding that can help with longleaf restoration. TNC, along with partners, applies those resources, which I think any of us trying to do it alone probably wouldn't have the same impact. The Fire Festival, which is an education and outreach component of this Arch collaboration that spends a lot of time lifting up why fire prescribed burning is important in our area and to our habitats, is super successful, and even virtually this year was able to reach more than 71,000 people in its virtual spaces. So the Cape Fear Arch partners are working individually and together and still talking. We have also had some informal get-togethers to make sure we still feel the networking component of what's so important in this partnership is able to move forward. But it's going strong even behind the scenes, and hopefully in the spotlight more when we're able to reconvene those quarterly meetings. I do want to also say that the Cape Fear Arch does have a website, capefeararch.org, and that is maintained mostly by Michelle at the Nature Conservancy. But there is a place and an opportunity there where you can click to sign up to receive our occasional newsletters and emails about things that are happening, and also to get notified of any upcoming meetings or conversations. So that is something that if you are interested in participating in a meeting, just being a public person that comes to this space, that there is a venue and an avenue for you to do that in this time. Stephanie, I know there were a couple of questions in the chat, and I feel like maybe we could just go straight to that. There were more than one about the longleaf restoration and military partnerships. So specifically the military ocean terminal, Sunny Point, so Matsu. And I want to just vaguely answer that because the Coastal Land Trust is not a leader in that space. But Matsu does participate in conversations. They are a great supporter of the prescribed burning and even these funding requests. They have provided letters of support that are instrumental in receiving large amounts of sum to be able to pull off prescribed burning in private and public spaces, so the Nature Conservancy and other ones. So they are engaged and they connect with us and also do participate in their own conservation programs there with longleaf management, fire. There's a lot of burning going over on that side in Brunswick County, and it can be from any of our conservation areas, TNC's owned preserves, Matsu, and even private landowners. I know I missed another question.
There was a question about the arch, and does the name of the group in the landform, just kind of explain that a little bit. Either of you, take it.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I see Richard LeBlanc just unmuted, so maybe I should let Richard answer this question.
Go, Richard, go.
Well, I don't remember the actual date of the meeting, but it was back there in 06 or 07. And we were trying to figure out the name, and I suggested Cape Fear Arch, which is it was a geological formation. That's where the name comes from, although geologists have since changed the name. But the name felt right, and the group accepted it. I'm very proud.
Well, so it refers to, and correct me if I'm not getting this right, Richard, but it is it's slightly higher. It's slightly more.
Oh, you want a description of the arch itself?
Yeah, geologic limestone rise.
Yes, it is. It goes inland from the Cape, really the mouth of the Cape Fear River is sort of like right in the middle of the arch. It's an elevation. If you go to the northeast, you get into the Pamlico, Albemarle lowlands, and if you go to the southwest into South Carolina, you get into the lowlands of South Carolina. But in between is this higher elevation. I mean, you think of an arch as something that you can see and has a high rise, but you can't see that because the land is still low, even though it's higher than the adjacent lands. And it goes all the way back into the sandhills. And what makes it special for biodiversity is it has always been a little higher than the other lands, and so has always been exposed. At times, maybe the sea level was higher and these other lands were flooded, but the Cape Fear Arch remained elevated, and it has been a place where the biodiversity can move. It can move inland, or it can move out into a larger coastal plain back when the ocean was lower. So that's the specialness of the Cape Fear Arch.
Thank you,
Richard.
And there's more. Let me add one other thing. There's more than 50 species of plants alone that are endemic to the Cape Fear Arch that are not found anywhere else.
All right, so thank you. That is always so refreshing. It's really hard to imagine 50 things here that no one else in the world gets to see except for when we are protecting them. So I love that moment. There were a couple other questions. One, there was a question about, is the owner of Orton involved in the Cape Fear Arch? And I will say that that Orton does a great job of their management. Their management is slightly different than some of their adjacent landowners. It's a private property. Since our meetings are open to the public, they do attend from time to time. They also serve as a partner and a support system for some of our funding sources. And they have at times been really amazing to open their property up to field trips that we have and demonstrations of management on the site. So while not actually a part of the MOU, they still are an active conservation-minded landowner that participates in some of the ARCH activities. And then I would also say there was another question about the Coastal Land Trust's current projects going on in the Cape Fear Arch area. And yes, the Coastal Land Trust is actively working on projects, one on the Cape Fear River, and of course we are still focused in the Guacamole area and have and are continuing to try to do conservation efforts in those spaces.
Jessica, I added a link in the chat just now that goes to our website, to a page that talks about our top 40 projects. We've sprinkled this through a lot of our talks, but there is a map. And Betty Lou, you asked the question, so I'll specifically direct your attention there. And you can see there are red dots on this map. And that can give you an idea of, within those red dots, there are various projects that are on the top 40. And you can see that there is a concentration of several of those in the southeast, and then they're also in the mid-coast, also in the northeast. So there certainly are some focus areas for us as the Coastal Land Trust within the Cape Fear Arch area.
And then there was one more question from the Facebook live stream about our work with any red wolf preservation groups. And just as Jessica from the Coastal Land Trust, with not as strong a space as an executive committee member, I would not say right now we have any active work going on in collaboration with any of those groups, but that's not to say that they don't participate in some of our meetings. Just currently right now, there's not a conversation that I'm aware of, but also my brain in 2020 does not remember all of our things from last year or what's going on next year. So I just want that disclaimer. We're not opposed to, anyone is invited to participate in the Cape Fear Arch in the area that has to do with conservation of those spaces. And Bill, I cannot speak at all to the state ports property and the Matsu situation. So that actually is an interesting moment. We get a lot of inquiries as committee members from the Cape Fear Arch about what our stance is on certain controversial issues that may impact conservation one way or the other. And because you saw that list that Scott showed you earlier of all of our partners and coming to this collaboration from different spaces, the Cape Fear Arch does not take a stance on those situations. It is simply a forum to become informed about what's going on. So anyone would be invited to that space, controversial or not, but we would not make an opinion, a decision, or put out a press statement regarding that.
Right. Any advocacy would really be on the individual organization, if it's something they were going to do.
Here's a biology question. On the slide earlier where it was like the ecological systems map, it had all those beautiful colors. New Hanover County was different. And New Hanover County looked like the ecological areas were striated instead of kind of all mixed up like the rest of the map. And I'm just curious if you can speak to that. Oh, it's that one. Yeah, second to the top right now.
Okay, sorry, I'd muted myself. So the question is New Hanover County. So this is work that Cecil Frost had done, and it was, I'm trying to make this bigger. It was done in pieces. So it wasn't all done at one time. He was working on a contract, various contracts. And in fact, I think what happened is that a lot of Cecil's work was started like at Camp Lejeune. I believe he had a contract, and then it was extrapolated out. And so there are probably things that were extrapolated out that someone didn't have a chance to go back. And I'm looking at that now, and I do see that is kind of really run together there. I'm guessing that's either a mapping error or it just needs to be checked to see what happened there, because that does look like it got really messed up.
Well, I was just curious because it looks completely different from the whole rest of the map. Everything's going a different direction and it's just all chunked together. So I was just curious if there was something really weird going on in New Hanover County.
No, I think that might be a mapping error. I didn't catch that earlier. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. I'm a map nerd too, so, you know, it's all right.
Can I interrupt?
Please do.
Sure.
Are you talking about the green areas up at the top of the county, which look like they were not identified as to what the original habitat was, except for the orange areas? Or are you talking about the vertical north-south areas along the east side of the Cape Fear River, or are you talking about both of those?
My curiosity was that it looked more striated, like green, red, orange, green, yellow, pink, and in kind of like these horizontal chunks, instead of the rest of the map kind of maybe looks like it's following more along watersheds.
Well, that does happen in the central and southern part of New Hanover County. The vertical lines that you're looking at there are following the Cape Fear River and the ocean currents. I mean, it's a very narrow landscape there, so you would expect to have a north-south orientation. So I don't see a problem. And this is before the city of Wilmington, right? This is the original habitat that we're looking at, right?
That's the idea.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
And the northern part, it just looks incomplete. It looks like it was not finished.
I think that's probably what it is. I think we extrapolated out from Cecil's work, and that didn't get checked. I just now realized that. So good eye. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
Gosh,
You got work to do now, Scott. No, I'm just kidding.
Any other questions?
I love that image.
Yeah, I do too.
It's wonderful what you're looking at there along the Black River. The northwest southeast orientation of the landscape. A lot of that was from the original Cape Fear River, creating those sand ridges. Those are elongated sand ridges that we're looking at there.
Well, were there any other questions? Let's stop sharing my screen.
Oh,
sorry.
yes. Oh, what are the threatened or endangered species in the lower Cape Fear River?
In the river
Well,
itself?
It just says LCFR, lower Cape Fear River is or maybe the area, the region. What about, are there threatened or endangered species in the Cape Fear Arch?
Short answer is yes.
Yeah. there's many.
Yeah,
There's many.
there's a list.
Yeah, I could make a list on them. I don't. And they change a lot. You know, the Natural Heritage Program focuses on, you know, identifying what's rare, but those threatened and endangered statuses, they come from other agencies. So we do track that information, and I could make a list, and I'd be happy to if someone sent me a sort of like an information request or something. But my short answer is yes. And if it's the river itself, there are some pretty notable ones with both of the sturgeon, you know, Atlantic sturgeon and short-nosed sturgeon use that section of the river, and they're both on the the federal list of endangered species. Trying to think. Certainly a lot of sea turtles along the coastal part of it. I'd have to go back and make a list.
Fair enough. That's something that we could post along with this talk on the website. So that's not a problem. And then I think one last question has popped into the chat. Curious if there were any priorities that have changed after Hurricanes Michael and Florence, or have any priorities become enhanced since then?
Right. And I will not speak for the Coastal Land Trust, because I think that was a slightly different answer than the Cape Fear Arch. The Cape Fear Arch opened that discussion, and it becomes more of a forefront of reacting to the hurricanes and the impacts it had, and then potentially incorporating discussions about what it might mean for how each of the individuals is changing their priorities. So, you know, just going back to the Cape Fear Arch being this collaboration and discussion space. I do know that some of the partners in there have done some assessments and priority changes and are starting to take those sorts of weather events that are increasing in intensity and frequency into their planning and protection strategies. I'm hoping that you'll see more discussions about that and more presentations about that in the Cape Fear Arch Forum moving forward.
Awesome. Hey guys, thanks so much for an awesome discussion and so many continuing questions on the topic. Scott, we really appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
Being here today. Yeah, this has been fabulous. I do want to update everybody on the upcoming events. So we've had a little bit of a fruit basket upset. Just nothing is wrong. We just have decided not to have the retirement celebration for Camilla this coming Wednesday. We got bogged down. We got too much on our plate, and we weren't going to be able to do the job we wanted to do. So I know I had mentioned that previously. I just wanted to let anyone here know that's postponed. We're going to wait to after the first of the year to reschedule. But we had been asking if you wanted to send a message to Camilla to use the Tribute app, and there's a link. I think Van can post that. There's still time to do that. There'll be plenty of time to do that, actually. So if there's any message you'd like to send Camilla, you certainly may do that. Next Friday for Little Lunch Lecture is TBD for the topic, but show up, there'll be something and it'll be great. And then December the 18th will be the last Little Lunch Lecture of 2020. And Kate Dixon and Ben Jones of the North Carolina Mountains to Sea Trail will talk about the trail, the history, and then also highlight some of the newer sections of the Mountains to Sea Trail that are in the coastal plain. So that'll be really kind of cool. So y'all join us for that. We'll take a couple weeks break over holidays and then come back on January the 8th, and we will hear about Bird Island and the awesome, again, another fantastic partnership that got that space under conservation. So y'all mark your calendars and come back and see us all the Fridays, and we will look forward to having you back. For now, have a fabulous weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.